father's playing hooky today.
Yeah.
He went to his girlfriend's church. I said,
Oh yeah. Wow. Okay.
It's 9 o'clock. My husband always asks me, what time is it? I said, we have three. We have one in the north, and one in the west. The Redskins will come on too.
Started. I will need to check with Pastor Dave. I know one of these Sundays we're going to be relegated to the basement. My memory as faulty as it is, it's dark down there, but if I recall, I think when we have been ousted from this place, miraculously they have provided donuts. Don't you have this? Don't you? I think that's correct, isn't it? Yeah, listen, I do not have an in with who does that, but those of you who do,
Be sure to remind them.
yeah, please be sure to remind them. So we're talking, and we will continue to have this conversation into November. We're talking about welcoming the stranger. And one of the things that I want to do, just to go back for a little bit, is to remind us of the widespread sort of references again and again and again with regard to the stranger, and the sort of the various contexts in which we find these, obviously. And one of the things that we have noticed in Exodus, we have noticed in Leviticus, we notice in Deuteronomy, multiple texts, is the fact that welcoming the stranger is tied to what? Remember your own history. Remember your own history. In case you are inclined to forget your history, please remember your history. And the history that is in these texts is that once upon a time you were strangers in a strange land. Remember your history, and on the basis of that memory, act accordingly. And we see this in, obviously, in in the Torah, in the Pentateuch, certainly in Exodus and in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, but we also see it in the prophets and certainly in the Psalms, right? Again, in a way, we could dwell on these texts because some of them are what might be called pre-exilic texts. Some of them are exilic texts, such as Jeremiah. Some of them are later on after the exile, and they all have in common, remember and welcome the stranger. Because once upon a time you were, and not only that, do not oppress the widow and the orphan, and what it says alien, but of course it all depends on the context. It's the same word. The word simply means stranger. It means sojourner. It's the same word again and again and again. Do not oppress. And why are these categories highlighted? Because generally it is understood that if you're an orphan, if you're a widow, which we'll talk about in a second, and if you are an outsider, a stranger, if you are a sojourner in the land, right, you are deemed to be at the bottom of the social and economic ladder. Do not neglect to help, but also do not oppress. And now, in my view, of course, and I don't think I'm being overly partial here, in my view, as I've said repeatedly, it is not my role. I don't mean within this group, but it's not really my role to say, well, I'm going to make the Bible relevant. No, it is relevant. And it was relevant 2,000 years ago, and it's relevant 100 years ago, and it's relevant yesterday, and it will be long after we are gone. I mean, not just from this room. When you're gone, it will still be relevant. And so we look at these texts and realize that this is not an indicative, this is not, we don't want to get overly caught up in all of the grammar here. This is not a subjunctive. Refrain from the you ought. Ought will kill you. Refrain from, it would be a wonderful thing if, okay? These are mandates. These are mandates. You will hear this word in the spring. During Holy Week, there is a particular word that is used for Thursday. It's called what? It's the same root of the word what? Mandate. That's why it's called Monday, Thursday. It's a mandate. It's a mandate to wash your feet, to care for the other. It's a mandate. This is a mandate. Do not do this. On the one hand. On the other hand, care for those. These are mandates. These are imperatives. And of course, we see it again in the gospel text. Once upon a time, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And the Greek that is used there, xenos, of course, gives rise to our word xenophobia. Right? Do not fear the outsider. Once upon a time, I was an outsider and you welcomed me. And the gospel writers are very, very attentive to the fact. And then, of course, we have the stories. And later on, we have, in Romans, keep in mind that, of course, the authorship of Romans is attributed to our friend who? Paul. What sets Romans apart from every other letter that Paul wrote is the fact that it is not a response letter. Let me explain. Every letter that Paul wrote was a response letter. The problem is that we don't have what the original letter was. So we have to take what Paul responded to as being accurate, except Romans. He simply wrote a letter to the Romans and saw fit that he would mention, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitalities to strangers. They did not write him about this. But he must know that this is a universal quality and principle that we have to establish in the manner. It is not enough for us to say, I care about, and then we don't act on it. We cannot allow our actions to betray our words. I say that because in our society, we have this remarkable idea that quite often our action betray our words. It is not enough to simply say, well, I'm wearing a cross and therefore, well, I'm happy for you and your descendants. That doesn't make me believe in act. Do something about this. And all of these texts remind us. We see it in Peter, we see it in Ephesians. And we're not even sure who wrote Ephesians, frankly. I know generally they say Paul wrote these letters. It might have been. But actually, that's still up for debate by scholars who have nothing else to do with their time. And they, But it's a reminder that if it's a different author, it still is an issue. And then, of course, we get to Ruth. And I started with this in part because there are two sections in the book of Ruth that focus on the idea of welcoming the stranger, at least two. But we begin with this irony that, in fact, the family of Elimelech, who is the husband of Naomi, and their 2 sons are leaving Bethlehem, which of course, as we discussed last time, the word means the house of bread. You're leaving the house of bread because there is a famine, there is no bread. And there is a fancy word that we use sometimes in figures of speech. I don't know of anyone who has ever used this figure of speech that I'm aware of, because it's rare. But how should I say? We know what a hyperbole is, right? Bear with me here, right? We use hyperboles to do what? Yeah, to exaggerate for effect, right? We don't use it just to exaggerate. We exaggerate we want to make a point. But what's the opposite of that? There is a figure of speech that the opposite of that. We use the ideas. If I would say, well, this, this idea is priceless, right? It's an understatement for effect. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a price. It doesn't mean it's cheap. It doesn't mean it's without worth. But we use that language, isn't it? Right? The word is called synecdoche. Okay? It's right. I can tell from your face, okay. It's an understatement for effect. It's an understatement for effect. And you may not be aware of this, and part of my role here is to make you aware of this. And that is, every single Sunday, we express ourselves using one petition that is a synecdoche. Give us this day our daily bread. You're not asking for a piece of Wonder White or whatever, or whatever it is that we don't eat. You're asking for that which is necessary to sustain us. So when we talk about the house of bread, yes, in a way it's a synecdoche, right? It represents everything that we need to sustain us. We need something to carry us on, and the family needed to leave because it is impossible for them to be sustained in the house of bread. And they go to a land of Moab, and the land of Moab, they have been expressly told, not just the family, but all of the people have been expressly told, do not go to Moab. Do not even get close to Moab. Because, of course, they're the what? Enemy. And we don't want, by the way, it's not just getting and interacting with the enemy. We don't even want you to get close to the enemy, because, that could rub off, right? And so what does the family do? They go straight into the land of Moab, because sometimes it is necessary to make that kind of sacrifice. To live. Not just to survive, to live. There are moments that we have to survive because of circumstances, but the word itself reminds us that it is a little bit of underliving. Literally is what the word means. You have to go. And what happens in Moab? The enemy, the outsider, the land that is told, do not enter, welcomes them. Welcomes them. You have food, and you are able to have a family with your 2 sons marrying Moabite women. It's shocking. It's shocking. Could you imagine this? What are you going to do next? Invite immigrants and outsiders? Tainting who we are? It's shocking. And as we said, of course, if you want the story to focus on the women, get rid of the men in the story. And so within the first 5 verses, it is Elimelech and his wife and his sons. And by the time we get to verse 6, it's Naomi and her daughters-in-law. The men are gone. Boaz will be there, but the men are gone. So, and then we have this idea that we see in Ruth, as we see in so many of these other texts. These are the universal human themes. Now, let me just say this. We're talking about biblical matters. We're talking actually about human matters here. So it's not like, let's talk about a study in this group, and because we're in the church and in this room, it's biblical. We are talking about human matters. So when we get out there, it's about human matters. When we get to our work and our home and whatever it is that keep us occupied, it's human matters. I'm not giving away a trade secret here. But some of us, in the last few months or so, have been receiving letters. These are not letters that you want to receive. These are letters that begin, "Dear colleague." And 4 pages later, you're told the things that you can say or not say, do or not do in higher education. Okay? So we have these letters. The most recent one, you're not supposed to speak about some of the universal themes, such as belonging, such as inclusiveness. By the way, I'm not making this up. And there are all kinds of, don't get me wrong, there are all kinds of footnotes. And see section 4.84, I'm making this up, right? And don't get me wrong, I love footnotes. I know it's one of the weird things, but I love footnotes. It's filled with stuff. Except these footnotes are meant to scare the fool out of you. I say this because some of the very things that we're told you cannot publicly speak about are universal qualities. Okay? And so this is what we have here. We have with these women, and we will see with Boaz later on, we have love, and we have kindness, and we have grace, and we have acceptance, and we have sacrifice as well, and belonging. And there is sadness, and there is joy. By the way, this is welcome to the landscape of being human. It is. And we're going to go through this. And there will be joy. The psalm. Sadness, grief lingers into the evening, but joy comes in the morning. We just don't know how long that evening is going to be. And it might be a while. But these things will remain. And in this story, the Moabites welcome this family. The sons are gone. Elimelech is gone. And so we have this remarkable situation of 3 widows. Their identities typically have to do with fathers and with husbands and with sons. Now, we may not like to acknowledge that in our day and age, but in that time and in the ancient Near East, that is how a woman's identity was typically understood in terms of who she. And as we talked about a week ago in this group, we have remnants of that still. You know, who gives this woman to be, right? Kind of thing. And then, of course, we have this idea of Naomi realizing, what are we going to do? We have 3 widows. I am the elderly mother-in-law. I have 2 daughters-in-law. And she says to her daughters-in-law, I think you should go back to your mother's home. You have a better chance for yourself. It's a remarkable statement because it means that Naomi is willing to return by herself, an elderly widow. Now, there are ideas in the story that will emerge later on, but for now, and of course, both daughters-in-law say, no, we're not leaving you. And she says, well, what are you waiting for? You know the tradition. Even if I were to have another son tonight, which, by the way, she begins to build this very kind of ludicrous scenario. Are you going to wait until he grows up so you can marry him? Go. And of course, Orpah returns, and we get the beautiful, poignant, deeply touching, remarkable moment of a transformation of one person to another. And I know we look to the New Testament for moments of conversion, and in early Christianity for moments of conversion. Here is an early one where Ruth says, entreat me not to leave you. Wherever you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. And then there is no argument after that. I'm going to go with you. And Ruth is making a determination to enter into a foreign land. So here we have Naomi and her family welcomed into Moab, and now we don't know what's going to happen. Can you go back? Can you go home again? I know what Thomas Wolfe says, right? But Naomi is going home again. Can you go home again? And before we think that, well, of course you can, you know, pause for a second. For folks who were taken or who left or who were driven out from their land, even if they're allowed to go back a year later or 2 years later or 5 years later, as was the case with indentured servants, that was a thing. They realized that they could not go home again because it was never the same. It was never the same. And Naomi says, okay, I'm going to go back because now there is food in Israel, in Bethlehem. And Ruth goes with her. We are told that Ruth clung to Naomi. And the word, it's kind of an unfortunate overtone, as sometimes are words and phrases that we've inherited over time that have taken on a different kind of both meaning and tone. This is not a negative thing. This word in Hebrew means you are staying close to. It's used multiple times in the book of Ruth, but this is the only time it's translated clung. It's translated differently elsewhere. And that's one of the things with translations, right? We make determinations as to what we want you to read. But Ruth stayed close to Naomi. In other words, I will stand by your side. I will stand by your side. I will not leave you. It is really a remarkable thing. And we asked, who made the right decision? there is the very practical decision that Orpah made. She went back to her mother's house. Who is to blame her? Who is to blame her? But Ruth went. Some decisions are practical and make sense and has everything that would suggest, right? You have chosen wisely. And then there are certain decisions that are generated from the heart, which on the surface looks as, this can't be right. And yet in the moment, it is the right decision, as we will discover. But then we have this remarkable when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred. It's just beautiful here. The town of Bethlehem saw Naomi returning, and they were stirred, and the women said, "Is this Naomi?" Don't let us read by that line too quickly to find what the next section says. The whole town was, is this Naomi? And within that question lies all kinds of, memories perhaps of a time when they left, choices that were made for those who would remain and those who would leave. And she said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara." And sometimes these words, as you know, have meanings to them. Such as Jacob and Israel this morning. Right? Israel meaning what? Essentially, one who wrestles with God. That's what it means. And we have Abram, you remember that, right? And changing to Abraham. Abram meaning the word in Hebrew, ab, of, sometimes with a V, means father. Okay? We know that a little bit better because Jesus says in the New Testament what? Abba, Father. And Abba is simply Aramaic. Okay. So and Abraham changes from exalted father to father of multitudes. Okay. We have these name changes. Peter, right? And so what we have here, again, the word Naomi, the name Naomi, has an overtone in Hebrew that means sweet or sweetness. And Mara in Hebrew means bitter. And so Naomi begins by saying, "Call me no longer Naomi, but call me Mara." And we want to pay attention to this because as much as this journey is continuing and it's continuing into the unknown, right? There is something honest about what Naomi is saying. And it's an invitation, I believe, for us to do likewise. And I'll explain. "For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." The Almighty, the El Shaddai, has dealt bitterly with me. "I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." Let me just pause there. What do you make of that statement? By the way, this is not a rhetorical question. Okay. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty.
The question is whether she's talking about food, which she couldn't have been because she went away because she was starving, or something else.
Or something else. And what is the something else?
She She was full of love, she was full of caring, she was full of compassion.
What else?
Family.
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 Family. Her husband and 2 sons. She has everything to shape her identity. I went to bed, but I came back empty. Is she coming back empty? By the way, I'm hearing voices, and I don't like that because people get put away for hearing voices. Culturally? By the way, let me take the space for Ruth at this moment. I'm standing by Naomi. I just got through saying, entreat me not to leave you, for wherever you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. And Naomi says, I'm coming back empty. And I'm Ruth standing there thinking, hello. I mean, I don't want to tell you the obvious here, but I just gave up everything here. Me? Okay. In a way, right? But here's the thing. And by the way, don't imagine that Scripture does not have humor. It's replete with humor. It's replete with humor. And we don't even have to look far. You remember Jesus healing the blind man with clay on his eyes? Remember that miracle story? And then, okay, but the spittle, the whole works. There are details here. And the clay, it's in Mark's gospel, the clay falls off of his eyes. And Jesus says, kind of like a good, I think, ophthalmologist or optometrist, says, what do you see? And, well, or can you see? And the man says, yes, I can see. Yeah, essentially, And Jesus says, well, what do you see? And the guy says, well, I'm seeing humans, but they all look like trees. But by the way, I'm not making it's in Scripture. And Jesus has to do a redo. Jesus does a redo. He says, let me try this again, okay? Because, of course, what good is it if you can see everyone and they look like oak trees? No. And so Jesus, by the way, there's a great deal of this. We don't want to overlook that. But there is a kind of a poignancy here. I went away with a husband and 2 sons. And I don't think this is a kind of a disparaging of Ruth, but I think within Naomi, it must be, and I cringe when I use this term, but this is the term. Ruth must at some level feel like a burden here. I mean, we don't want to think this, but you must feel as if yes, I'm coming back to Bethlehem. Yes, there is food, and so I should be grateful and thankful. But then Naomi says something else. And it's an invitation to us to take it honestly and seriously, but also it's a challenge. I went away full, but who brought me back empty? It is the Lord. It's the Lord who brought me back empty, and this is not just L-O-R-D, lowercase. In Hebrew, it's Yahweh. And in the English, there are different ways of translating the word Lord to distinguish it. And when you look in the New Revised Standard Version, it's Yahweh is always going to be translated with uppercase L-O-R-D. God is the one who has brought me back empty. And so the question is, if you have a relationship with God that is grounded, serious now. This is grounded in faith, in trust. Should you have the freedom to question?
Yes.
By the way, I don't mean to question theoretically, the way we care theoretically. And you show me someone who loves theoretically, and I will show you someone who doesn't exist. Okay? Not that kind of, actually question. And do we have a biblical, frankly, mandate to question? Yes. Yes. Okay, here is the example. You remember Abraham questioning God? On behalf of whom? Sodom and Gomorrah. And you're sitting here thinking, hello, is this going to be the one thing that you want to question God about? Sodom and Gomorrah? But he does. And not only does he, in a way, challenge God, he says, are you really going to destroy an entire city? Think about your own justice. And then we get this, okay, if you can show me 50 righteous people. And I suppose Abraham could walk away, but he doesn't. He says, 45.
Works it down, yeah, you're right.
And God says, okay. So, when you're on a winning streak, what do? Keep going, absolutely. And he says, how about 30? And God says, okay. And by the way, if you have never fallen in love with God, this is a moment, right? God is saying, you know what, I'm okay, all right. 30. And Abraham, being Abraham, says 20. But he is starting to realize what's going on, because he says, far be it for me, By the way, maybe we don't use that phrase anymore, but we know that phrase, far be it for me to tell you what to do. And generally, if someone says that to me, I'm itching to say, yes, very far be it from you to tell me what to do. I haven't had that occasion yet, so I'm hoping that in time, someone is going to say, far be it for me to tell you what to do, Dr. Gossai, and then I will say, yes, very far be it from you to tell me. It hasn't happened. But, so Abraham says, far be it from me. But God says, 20. And then Abraham says, I know I'm pushing my luck here. How about 10? And God says, for 10. Here is the thing. Who stops asking? Abraham. We don't know, though we suspect, that for 5. And maybe for 1. We don't know. But we do find out in the New Testament that, in fact, as it turns out, for 1, I will save the world kind of thing. But Abraham walks away. But what the legacy that he leaves, among other things, is the fact, if you believe and trust and it's grounded, you should be able to ask and even challenge. And it might not really eventuate in a way that pleases you necessarily, but you should ask. But you should also have the capacity to complain. And Naomi complains. Naomi says, God, you are the one who brought me back empty. And she leaves it there. And as a reminder, sometimes we need to ask the questions and leave it alone. Let the question become. Just let it. As Jesus does on the cross. Essentially referring to the opening line of Psalm 22. There is no answer that comes down. It's left hanging there, my God, why have you forsaken me? The gut-wrenching call of a sense of being alone or feeling that you have been abandoned. I'm calling out. And so Naomi says, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. And we don't have too many, excuse me, we really do not have references to God in this story. It's a rarity. We have stories that are littered with references to God. But this is not one of them. But we also have stories that do not refer to God. And I love that idea because referring to God regularly, or if you're really uncharitable, and none of us here is, and you say ad nauseum, that does not make you righteous or religious. No. We have a book, as you well know, in the Bible that never refers to God. Famously, in the Old Testament. The book of the book of Esther never mentions God once. The word God does not appear in the book. But the story is about everything that is righteous and divine and good and human. Everything. Simply saying God, 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 God. No. But Naomi is rooted here and feels confident that she could ask. So here we go. New information quickly. So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, all of a sudden, we had never heard about this before. All of a sudden, we are told Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Okay, Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go into the field, glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose sight I might find favor. And she said, go, my daughter. And we see a change here where Ruth is now what? There is nothing inherently wrong about being her daughter-in-law. That is, by the way, her legal status. That's her legal status. She is the daughter, I don't particularly like this language, son-in-law, mother-in-law. That ending of it in law tells you, of course, it's what? Legal. But she refers to Ruth as my daughter. My daughter. It changes the dynamic of the relationship, and she says, just go and do this. Do we have any, do we glean today? Anyone?
I have done it.
You mean walking by a...
I mean, it was a project to go and glean from the apple trees after people had gone, taking the best of it, and things that were on the floor, on the ground. We went to make them available for charity reasons.
Yeah. By the way, it still happens. It still happens. let me give you, I've only ever understood this in one moment of my life along these lines. And I remember the summer before I started my PhD work and left for the UK. I visited some family friends, and he was a potato farmer, Bruce. Bruce was a potato farmer, big potato farmer in northern Minnesota there. And Bruce, and just we were casually visiting, and Bruce says to me, would you like to come into the field and be on the harvester to see how this works? And I said, sure. And Bruce said, here's what you need to do. Now, this is in the heart of the summer, and Bruce is sitting in this air-conditioned cabin, okay? And, you know, the truck is driving along. You've seen the way this works with the big spout that, okay? And Bruce says, I need to have you stand on the platform behind me and keep track of the potatoes as they're coming across the belt. Listen, I'm telling you right now, I'm about to start my PhD. So I think I've got this. I'm confident I've got this. And I'm standing on the platform, and within the first 5 minutes, I'm shouting, I kid you not, I'm shouting, because Bruce is in this enclosed, air-conditioned thing. I'm shouting, Bruce, I'm losing the potatoes. And finally, I get Bruce's attention, and he stops. I said, Bruce, I'm losing the potatoes, they're falling. And Bruce opens the cabin and says, they're supposed to do that, the small ones, okay? Because I was concerned that, by the way, I have one job here. I'm thinking, you're going to lose your potatoes here. And what I learned from Bruce that day, outside of the fact that this is not a job I ever want to do again, what I learned from Bruce that day is the idea that the smaller potatoes that fell through the slots of that belt are left in the field for the migrant workers to come and take. And they do. It's the gleaning of the field where it yours, because there is an understanding that you have to take care of this. And it's actually a remarkable thing. So outside of the craziness that tells me, okay, scratch farmer off of your possible job that you will ever do in your life, it's the idea that helped me understand what gleaning was. And so Ruth goes into this field to begin gleaning, and she said, go, my daughter-in-law. So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came in the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. And Boaz says to the reapers, the Lord be with you. They answered, the Lord bless you. It's a remarkable thing. This is quite a bit. I'm just going to give you what I think. This is really very different from saying, hey, how's it going? Okay. This is really a greeting that is grounded almost in a sacred blessing. And even in our liturgy, when we say, the peace of the Lord be with you, and also with you, and share the peace. That's not an invitation for us to say, meet me out in the parking lot, or hey, how's it going? Or, no, actually, it's an invitation to do what? to say, peace be unto you. I know that sounds awkward, right? Or peace be with you. But that's the invitation. And so here he comes, and he is not only saying this, his workers respond because they know. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge, in case we forgot this, right? What's Boaz's question? To whom does this young woman belong? To whom does this young woman belong? That's the question, right? It's not like, do we have a new person over here? To whom does this young woman belong? Because, of course, her identity has to be grounded. Yes, yes. And I love it. The young man who is in charge of the reaper says, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reaper. So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, not even resting for a moment. And Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or to leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Why would Boaz do this? To keep her safe, right? But my question still remains. Why would he?
Because if she stays with the other women, then she'll be protected from men who might try to take advantage of her or something like that. I don't know.
I love that. Let me just tell you what Carolyn just said.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Because you might not have seen her face over here. Carolyn just said, you know, protected from the, you know, the men out there, you know, kind of. It's probably true. And how do we know that? Because the text actually says that. But my question is, right? She's an outsider. They had never met. She's, quote, a foreigner. She's a stranger. We have just asked, to whom does this woman belong? We know that she doesn't belong to us. And yet Boaz says to her what? Stay close to the women. By the way, in case you're keeping track, and I'm going to put you to the test, does that phrase ring a bell? Stay close? It's the same Hebrew word as clung. Remember I told you earlier that Ruth clung to Naomi? And it sounds as if somehow that's a negative thing. It's the same word here, exact same Hebrew word. It's pronounced dabak. Stay close to the young women. To ensure, right, one, that you belong here. By the way, this is what I'm getting at. First of all, you go to Moab and you're welcomed. And then on the other hand, you come to Bethlehem. And okay, maybe miraculously you enter into the field of the one person who, but you are welcome. And you are protected. You are welcome and protected. You can't just say you're welcome and leave it, and then we don't know what will happen to you in terms of your safety. I have said to faculty and to colleagues that it is not, for example, it is not enough for us to say that X is available. It is, if I'm Boaz, it is not enough for me to say to Ruth, the field is available to you, and walk off. And I've said to colleagues, to faculty, something cannot only be available, it has to be accessible. And part of being accessible is to protect. That's part of it. By the way, we have a lot of things in this country that are available, and a ton of which is not accessible to large groups of people. We know that, right? And you can fill in a whole series of blanks there. Availability is important. Accessibility, it only works if it's accessible. That's it. That's it. And he makes this accessible to Ruth. Keep your eyes on the field that's being reaped and follow them. And then, to Carolyn's point, I have ordered the young men not to bother you. Right? Why do you have to make a statement like that? Because likely they will. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what they have drawn. Then she fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me when I'm a foreigner? This is a gut-wrenching kind of question. Who am I to have found favor with you? I'm a foreigner. By the way, I did not expect to find favor with you. Why? Because one wouldn't expect this, and yet I have. And Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been told to me, how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Think of the vocabulary here. You're a foreigner. You have left behind you. You have accompanied this person, and you have come here for refuge. What do we do to those who come for refuge because there is war, or there is violence, or there is no food? I've heard that you have come for refuge. And then she said, may I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord. And that's lowercase Lord here, simply means sir. For you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants. You have comforted me. Meaning, we only comfort those who need strength. We only comfort those who suffer. We only comfort those who are weak. I have never, and I suspect, I don't mean to be audacious, but I have never, nor would I suspect you have either, needed to comfort anyone or have comforted anyone who is strong and who is doing just fine. You don't go and say, I need to comfort you. I know that, no. We comfort the weak, the suffering, those who are pained, those who are alone. And she says to him, you have comforted me. The word literally means with strength. That's what it means. In other words, in my state of weakness and aloneness and being a refugee and coming into a foreign land and not having anyone or anything, you have granted me comfort. One final word here. In this case, yes, it has to do with the words, but more importantly, it has to do with the deeds and the actions. In this case, comfort came in the form of acceptance and food. It came even with leftovers.
He initially addressed her as daughter. Is that particularly significant, or was that a common address from an older man to a younger lady?
Right. And as we will discover later on, right, a little awkward because, of course, I hope I'm not giving away trade secrets here. Okay. They do get married. But it's a kind of respect here. It's a kind of respect here. My daughter. All right. We need to stop there. I don't know if you'll be relegated to the dungeon. I meant basement.
Do you really think we're going to have class because this isn't the bishop coming?
And yeah, and I need to remember, I think there was one Sunday that we may be off, and it could be next Sunday. I think it is, right? And then I know also there's one Sunday that we will actually be downstairs. November 2nd. Jeff knows what's going on. Jeff knows what's going on. Anyway, thanks everyone. I know, and I know. And don't go ahead and read and finding out what's going on.